The South African Civil Aviation Authority hosted its inaugural summit on gender and transformation today. It's been more than 105 years since the first commercial flight. But global statistics indicate that women constitute less than 6% of pilots in the entire world. But to discuss this, I'm joined by the Aviation Authority's Director for Civil Aviation, Ms. Poppy Khoza, on Skype. Poppy, thank you so much for your time. And I suppose let me start here. I mean, that statistic is quite, flabbergasting. Less than 6% of pilots in the world, of course, are constituted by women. What informs this?
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us. So we are very concerned, which is the reason why we decided to host the National Aviation Gender Summit. Perhaps you will remember that in the previous year, the South African Civil Aviation Authority hosted the first Global Aviation Gender Summit in Cape Town. And the reason for that was because scanning the environment to look at the landscape of aviation or civil aviation globally, we then discovered that there is, in fact, a challenge when it comes to gender inclusivity or transformation issues, which makes it possible for women to access the civil aviation sector. Post the Global Aviation Gender Summit, of course, there were outcomes that were adopted. And then we took a decision that we need to have a National Aviation Gender Summit in order for us to pave the way in implementing the global outcomes so that we can begin to see transformation, we can begin to see more women accessing this very male-dominated industry. As you have indicated, the statistics that we are sitting at, in fact, the figures, they change from time to time, but they hover between 6 and 8% of women accessing or playing a meaningful role in this space. We then said the status quo cannot remain, particularly because globally there is an indication that we will soon be running out or there would be a global shortage of technical skills. I'm talking about pilots, air traffic controllers, aeronautical engineers, and so on. And then we are saying, in order for us to prepare in building that pipeline such that we don't have a shortage, how do we ensure that when a discussion on the demand and supply, as we discuss the issues of supplementing and ensuring that the pipeline doesn't run dry, we cannot have a discussion that excludes women. One of the reasons why we also took a decision to host the global the National Aviation Gender Summit is precisely to bridge that gap. It cannot be correct that, so many years in our democratic dispensation, we still have this challenge of less women taking, one, leadership roles in the civil aviation sector, but two, accessing the very technical skills which we believe that women should in fact be playing a meaningful role because they have proven that they are indeed capable. You will recall that we have been celebrating in the past few months when we saw one of our female pilots, although in the Air Force, Major Mandisa Vega, performing an air display during the presidential inauguration. And those are stories that are unprecedented. And we are saying, because there are women such as Asnat Mahapa, the women such as Buitumelo Katisi, women such as Refilo Lidwaba, who have broken the glass ceilings, who have in fact proven that women are indeed competent. What is it? Where should we structure our discussion such that a rural girl somewhere who has aspirations to enter this industry does not find it difficult to access careers in civil aviation?
And let's talk about that, Poppy. You're mentioning a very important point, which I don't want us to miss here. It's very clear that there's a lack of transformation in civil aviation at this point. But what seems to be the barriers of, access to aviation for women, particularly also women in South Africa and black women?
So during the discussion, we kind of narrowed it down. Firstly, the issue of So we believe that these are structural issues. One, the access to civil aviation in terms of funding is not very easy. To train as a pilot, for instance, can cost you just above $1 million. The issue of awareness, particularly to Black women who, I mean, if you take our setup, we have the rural areas, we have the townships. How many people would ordinarily know more about careers in aviation? It's not too many people. When you talk about the rural areas where there is no airport, there is no pilot, there is no traffic controllers. So the likelihood of a young girl growing up in the rural area of knowing about the careers in aviation or even business opportunities for that matter is almost zero. The reason why we still see a shortage of women in these technical fields is because many women, statistics do show that, are not very keen in taking up what we term STEM subjects, concentrating on science, technology, engineering, as well as mathematics. And these technical skills do require some level, or rather, you need to have at least maths and physics in order for you, to transition into these technical skills. But we also find that because quite often a lot of aviators, I'm talking about women, especially Black women, stumble upon careers in aviation post-matric. One of the systemic challenges is that you don't learn about aviation at basic school level, which is why we're very excited that the Department of Transport is beginning to have conversations with other government departments to say, how do we organize ourselves such that, one, a young girl in the rural area receives some education or some awareness about careers in aviation at basic school, orientate them as they grow up such that when they finish matric, they have other choices or they can make choices to enter this space. But funding, we believe that it is one of the greatest barriers in terms of getting more women to access, followed, of course, by others.
Absolutely. And in so discussing such, issues, I can only imagine that there were also, discussions around, some of the challenges which the civil aviation as a whole is facing. In one side, you're trying, to bring access for women to come to civil aviation, while it seems the civil aviation industry on its own is facing its own challenges. And I wonder, Poppy, if what the perspective is of the civil aviation, as well as the gender summit, with some of the challenges that we're seeing here from SA Express as well as SAA, with the bailout now being given to SA Express, so to suspend the grounding and to allow SA Express to fly. I mean, what's the perspective of both the civil aviation and the gender summit on some of the issues faced by the industry?
So our discussion was pretty much confined to gender equality or gender inclusivity. But of course, also the issues of leadership. How much conversation do we have around, the issues of leadership, in the broader society? I will not necessarily talk about the grounding of SA Express because, of course, it really did not have much to do with the discussions at the summit. But there were strong leadership issues that were discussed to say we do need aviators who will take up, positions in a responsible manner, who will ensure that when one is given an opportunity to lead, we need to do so diligently. So I will only limit the discussion perhaps closer to what you are asking, to the issues of leadership, to say we need to build leadership skills at a very young age so that we avoid many other problems that could creep in at a later stage.
Well, Poppy Khoza, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Poppy Khoza joining us, the Authorities Director for Civil Aviation.